so many of us run from our pasts and we say, I don't know what my purpose is. I got to go find my purpose. I would challenge you to sit in silence and sit in the potential discomfort and reflect. What are some of the hardest times you've ever had to go through? What are things you don't ever want somebody else to have to go through? There's a chance that your purpose is hidden somewhere in there.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Heart Inspired, the show dedicated to highlighting individuals in their pursuit of authentic leadership. We peel back the layers to uncover the roadblocks we all face, explore the actions we can take, and how to persevere towards the best version of ourselves. It is my hope that you'll be inspired by their story and gain some insights to help you in your own journey. Kevin Palmieri is the founder, CFO, and co-host of Next Level University. Kevin has experienced success before he started this business, but not without dealing with some dark days. Listen in to hear how Kevin relied on his inner strength and circle to start the journey of healing himself and now helping others. Please welcome my guest, Kevin Palmieri. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
I am doing so well. It's very exciting to see you again. And I'm very excited to see where we go with our conversation today, my friend.
Yes, me too. So, when we first had our introductions and you shared your story, it was definitely challenging, comforting, like a lot of emotions came up for me to see somebody like yourself be so successful today and go through the adversity and the 1-2 punch every, steps of the way. There's good news, right? And so we're going to talk about your journey and then talk about the good news, maybe get some nuggets of how others who maybe have gone through some of the adversities of their own can see some light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm going to turn over to you. Where did it all start?
Yeah, it really all started, and I didn't connect this until later in life, but I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. So I didn't know my father. I didn't meet my dad to the point where I could understand that he was my father until I was 27. So I was raised in a family that was lower middle class. We didn't have a lot of money. There was definitely conversations fairly often about how we were going to pay rent. And obviously as a young child, that can be quite stressful. And I do believe that has led me in many ways to where I am today and my relationship with money, which I can talk more about, but I've definitely had to work on. But my childhood, other than that, was fairly quote unquote normal. I played sports. I had friends. We would ride our bikes around the neighborhood. We'd stay out. We'd play manhunts, hide and go seek and all that stuff. So that was all pretty normal. But I realized pretty quickly that after I graduated high school, I didn't want to go to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I did know I didn't want to take the path that everybody else was taking. So after high school, I got a job at a gas station and I was pumping gas as a gas station attendant. And then I just job hopped from basically 16 until, 24. I was just hopping around from job to job, manual labor. I was a personal trainer. I was a forklift driver. I was a truck driver. I was many, many, many different things. But I eventually got this interesting opportunity in the weatherization industry. And all that means is it was our job to go into buildings and make them more energy efficient. I worked for the state. So the company I worked for, we got state contracts.
Okay.
The beautiful part of that is when you get a state contract, you get paid a state rate, AKA anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour, which for a 24-year-old kid, when I got that job, or 23, that's
pretty decent.
That's pretty good. It's pretty good money.
That's even decent today.
Yeah, especially when number one, you have no idea how to make money. That wasn't something I was good at. And number two, it was very much, I felt lucky. I felt very lucky to have that unique opportunity. But something interesting happens when that amount of money starts to hit your bank account. You assume things are going to change internally. So if you were to fast forward a year or 2 years after I got that job, you would see a 25-year-old man who had a model girlfriend, who had a sports car. I had the body of my dreams, quite literally, because I had just done a bodybuilding show, new apartment, high-paying job. If you're on the outside looking in, you must assume that I'm crushing it. I'm super happy. I'm super fulfilled. I'm on purpose. I'm in love. I'm all these things. But the truth is, I was pretty miserable. And I was very insecure. I was not confident. I had very little clarity on what I wanted out of my future. I wasn't a great partner because I was a very empty cup. I didn't have much to give to my partner. So one day my my partner came to me and she said, "Hey, I want to move across the country from the East Coast to California and chase my dreams." And I gave her every reason in the world why she shouldn't do it. I was afraid of being left behind. I was afraid she'd find somebody better. And she ended up leaving me. And she moved across the country and she chased her dreams. And that's exactly what she should have done. But when that happened, I had to take a look in the mirror. And I remember asking myself, how could anybody ever love this version of you? You can't even love yourself. How is anybody else going
Wow.
to love you? And that was my initial, what is this self-awareness thing? Like, what is this
Mm.
self-awareness thing? Why do I need to get to know myself at a deeper level? Here's the problem. I started working on self-improvement and I started working on self-awareness. But for some reason, I fell back on the, if I make more money, all of these other problems are going to go away. That's the thing. I just didn't make enough money yet. So that next year, I said, I'm going to make the most money I've ever made in my entire life. That is my pure intention for this year. I will do whatever it takes legally and within alignment to do that. So that year starts off, I get a promotion, and now I'm a foreman at this company that I'm working at, which means I open the job, I run the job, and then I close the job out. So I'm working a lot of hours. That year was the craziest year that company had ever had. And we ended up spending 10 months out of the 12 months of that year on the road. So I was living in hotels for 10 months out of that year because most of our contracts were in different states. But I loved it because I was making money. I was making, $75 an hour when I was working in New Jersey. I'm all for that. So we get to the end of the year. I have my final pay stub in hand. I open up that bad Larry, and I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree. But I had another one of those moments where I realized, oh, no. I thought this money was going to fix the confidence and the insecurity and the lack of clarity and the lack of purpose. It actually has made it worse because I'm looking for this key to quote unquote happiness. And I thought it was in this final pay stub. And in that moment, I realized that for most of my life, I had lived unconsciously. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. I fell in love with podcasting while I was quite literally falling out of love with my job.
And
And
what year was that? So you were 26, but what year? Because podcasting has become like,
yeah,
the new trend.
2000. So I started the podcast in 2017.
Okay.
And I made the money in 2016. So it was right after I made that money. I said, I am in. This is the best ever. Oh my God, everything is not what I thought it was. Okay, cool. Let me try something else. When I started the podcast, it was just a passion project. I just wanted to have conversations, much like you and I are having right now. I wanted to learn about people. But I started calling out of work. I'd start showing up late. I'd start leaving the job site early. I was just out of it. I couldn't do it anymore. And it eventually got to the point where I would have to be in New Jersey, which was 6 hours from where I lived. I lived in Massachusetts at the time. I would have to be there Monday morning, 7 a.m. to start a job. I would go to sleep in Massachusetts at 9 p.m. I'd sleep 3 hours until midnight. I'd wake up and then I would drive directly to the job site and I'd work an 8-hour day and then I would go to the gym after. And it was just, I just needed to be home.
You were existing, not living.
I was just trying to survive.
Yeah.
I think that's probably I was just trying to get through it.
Yeah.
And it just kept getting worse and worse. And I knew the days were numbered there and my mental health was taking a turn. My physical health wasn't good because I wasn't sleeping and I wasn't eating well. And eventually it got to the point where I woke up in a hotel room in New Jersey. My alarm went off at probably 5:15. I sat up, I slid to the edge of the bed and I'm lacing up my work boots. And I'd done this 1,000 times, just another day of work. But that day it was different because it was like there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time. And every single one was on a different station. And one was saying, I know you want to leave this job, but you're stuck here forever. The second thing is, you're never going to make this kind of money again. You got lucky to make this money. This is never going to happen again. If you do leave, if you find the courage to leave, what are your friends going to think? If you find the courage to leave, what is your family going to think? They look up to you. And do you really think you're going to take this podcast thing and then run off into the sunset with it? And in that moment, Michelle, I believe that if I was to take my life, I would take my problems with me. One of the things I'm so big on and I always talk about is the importance of the people around you. I had somebody I felt safe to text. I texted my business partner, who was just my mentor. I explained to him what was going on. I leaned on him. I was vulnerable. I was brave. I was courageous. And he said, Kev, so much has changed for you over the last few years, but your environments have stayed the same. I think it's time for you to change your environment. So I ended up leaving that job 3 or 4 months later. And then I became very broke, and I began the journey of being an entrepreneur and trying to figure out how to start a business, how to grow a podcast, how to make money. And I always like to say this because I don't want anybody to think I went from where I was to where we are. So after I left my job, I think I left in 2018. The next 4.5 years of my life were the hardest by far, bar none. Nothing comes close. So that was just as much of a challenge as everything else I dealt with. It's just a challenge in the right direction, I think, is probably a good way to put it.
Yeah. So that just opened up the door to a whole new set of feelings, emotions. Yeah. So broke Kevin. We've all been there in the entrepreneur world.
Of course.
Were you homeless?
No. I understand circumstantially that not everybody is able to do this, but when I started to know, I had those moments of this is not going to last. I can't do this job forever.
Yeah.
I ended up moving in with my best friend. Okay. He was an entrepreneur. I was becoming one. So I was paying $500 a month to rent out the bedroom and live with him. My car was paid off. And I think I had, $10,000 or $12,000 saved up in the bank.
You talked about your inner circle, your business partner, your family. How were they throughout all of this?
I would say my family was as supportive as you can be without understanding why somebody is doing what they're doing. I remember when I told my mom and my grandmother, I said, yeah, I left my job. And my grandmother was like, what? What do you mean? Well, so you're going to go get another job, right? And I said, no, I will never punch a time clock for somebody else as long as I live. I can't. That's not what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm supposed to be doing. I know that. I know that now because I've gotten a little taste of what this is like. So my family has been very supportive to the level of understanding that they have. My mom said to me, I just want you to be happy. I just want you to be happy. And my grandmother definitely understood. And the other thing too is, the friend that I lived with is an entrepreneur. My other best friend is now he's my business partner. So I have a very small circle, and it's designed that way. If you don't understand and you're not willing to support the mission and what I'm doing, then I probably won't spend a ton of time with you just because I'd rather spend the time on the mission.
And so you have these wonderful inner circle. Obviously, the unhappiness and those demons that were inside you earlier, sitting inside that same living room, if you will, was a little radio station that was tuning into something that was bigger and better for you. Yeah. And you just had to find the volume to turn it up.
I think that so many of us are searching. We're searching for our purpose. Yeah. I think most of us, our purpose has already happened to us. It's somewhere in the past. For me, I already had this podcast, and then I had that moment of suicidal ideation, and then it just connected. Oh, I don't ever want anybody to go through what I went through. I don't want somebody to find success and end up miserable. How do I use my podcast as a platform for positive self-improvement and understanding self-awareness? Yeah. If that moment didn't happen to me, I don't know if I would be doing what I'm doing. So many of us run from our pasts and we say, I don't know what my purpose is. I got to go find my purpose. I would challenge you to sit in silence and sit in the potential discomfort and reflect. What are some of the hardest times you've ever had to go through? What are things you don't ever want somebody else to have to go through? What are some of the things you're most proud of? What are the things that really, really make you sad? The things that make you so angry that you wish other people would be as interested as you are? There's a chance that your purpose is hidden somewhere in there. Where things get cloudy is when we find our purpose, but we don't have our vehicle. I think that's where a lot of people are. The purpose is to help. It's to help something in some way, shape, or form. For many of us, we say, well, how do I make money doing that? How do I grow a business? How do I grow an Instagram or a YouTube or whatever it is? I think a lot of us get lost in the vehicle, but we have an understanding of what our purpose is more than we think. I would say for most people.
So you talked a little bit about your business. And so the structure of your podcast, as I'm a newbie, and that was, I said when we first started, I feel like I'm doing a dress rehearsal or an interview here because I'm one of the new ones in the block. And my reason for doing it was exactly what you said, is to talk to interesting people, have a voice, and make a difference in somebody else's life that may have a struggle or a little cloud that's just not giving them way to see a little bit more clear on what their vision and purpose is. So when you started the podcast, how did it become a business and not a hobby?
We started just like everybody else. We started with one episode a week. We'd have a guest, we'd do it solo, whatever it was. But I remember Alan and I were in our quote unquote studio, which was at his mother's house in his sister's old bedroom. And I remember
like a lot of studios have happened that way.
100%. And if you looked on YouTube, you'd never know that's where it was because it was done up as nice as it could be for where it was. But I told Alan, I said, hey, I am running out of money. My credit cards are all at this point just about maxed out. I need to start making money. We need to start making money as a business. Now, Alan is very, very good with money. He's very good with numbers. His living expenses were extremely low. He could have kept living like that for a long time. I couldn't because I like.
Well,
nice
you already had
and,
a taste of the good life, so
yeah, right. So I sat down with him and I said, "Hey, man, I got to start making money. This has to become a business because I can only be this broke entrepreneur for so long. I am not built for this." So what happened was we both started coaching for free. So I reached out to somebody who I knew was a listener of the podcast because she had shared a clip or messaged me, and her name is Jenna. And I said, "Hey, Jenna, I am interested in doing coaching. I've never done it before, so I don't really feel comfortable charging for it. It's totally free. You and I will hop on the phone every week and we'll just talk about what we talk about on the podcast. Is that something you'd be interested in?" And she said, "Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that." So I ended up getting one client for free. And then I think I ended up getting like 3 or 4 other clients for free. I coached them all for anywhere from a month to 2 months, I think. And then at the end of the 2 months, I said, "Hey, I can't do this for free anymore because my schedule is actually filling up, which is nice. What do you think of $50 a week?" And that's how we started the business. We started coaching people for $50 an hour, no contract, none of that. Just, yeah, we're going to hop on the phone every week and we'll talk about stuff. That for us is when we really, really turned it into a business because that showed us proof of concept. If you have value to add on a podcast or on a YouTube channel or whatever it is, you have more value you can add deeper. If you're just talking to somebody one-on-one, that was really the proof of concept that we needed to go all in on that. And that's really been the main thing we've done for the last however many years.
So now you go from free to charging, and are you still recovering?
Literally slap a results not typical sticker on my forehead because the way this all happened for me, my mental health improved exponentially when I left my job. Even though I was broke and I was struggling and I didn't know how I was going to pay the bills at points, it was always better than what I used to do. So I have a firm belief that when I left that job and I went all in on a mission and a purpose, my life got exponentially better because I actually started feeling fulfilled. I mean, yeah, I'm sure I was healing through something, but it wasn't nearly as bad as I think you would expect.
Yeah. Well, they say the opposite of purpose is depression.
Fair. Yeah.
So you definitely were pushing towards that. So let's go back a little bit because you did mention something that was a little bit dark. You had thoughts of suicide, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So what was that like, and who was there to help you, or was there somebody there to help you to pull you out of that?
The scary thing is that wasn't the first time I had those thoughts. I remember I lived in Boston with my girlfriend and we lived with another couple and we had this really nice 3-story apartment. It was just beautiful. It was brand new. It was amazing. One day I was home alone. Everybody else was at work and I had time off of work. And I remember I was playing video games upstairs and it got to the point where I put down the controller and I remember thinking to myself, if this is what life is, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do this anymore. Everything is gray and everything is bland and I'm afraid of everything and I'm not excited for anything. I don't know what my future holds. I don't really think I want to be here. And when my girlfriend got home, I told her that. And she said, I really think you should go to therapy. And I said, no, don't need it. Don't need it. I'm good. And
denial,
yes. And we ended up having a conversation about it. And I said, honestly, you're probably right. I should give this a try. Let me see what this is about. So I ended up going to therapy and had every fear that you could have. I'm going to cry. I'm going to look bad. I'm going to be embarrassed. I got to be vulnerable. Something that I was so afraid of is actually something I really looked forward to after the first time. I really felt safe talking and sharing and being vulnerable. And I always felt better when I left. So I probably did that for a few months And then we ended up moving, and that's when the breakup happened. But when I really had it in New Jersey, when I was sitting on the edge of the bed, I messaged Alan. Alan was there for me, and I knew he didn't have all the answers, but I knew he could help me enough. And I also felt very, very safe with him. And one of the quotes I always say, and I think it really helps, is the quality of your relationships is directly correlated to the level of vulnerability in them. If you struggle being vulnerable with the people in your life, I'm willing to bet those relationships probably aren't as good. I would bet a lot of money that they're not as good as they actually could be.
Absolutely.
That's why I went to him. I felt safe sharing with him. I knew he understood self-improvement, personal development, and mental health at a fairly deep level. So yeah, what he did for me, and this is an interesting thing, he gave me permission to make a different decision. If I reached out to somebody who had a fixed mindset and who is super scarce, they might have said, Kev, nobody likes their job. Wait till Monday, it'll get better. Like, I know it sucks right now, but wait till Monday and it'll get better. Alan gave me permission. He said, well, maybe you should do something new. Like, maybe you should change your scenery. You should change your environment. So yeah, Alan is the one who helped me tremendously. And for a long time, it was hard for me to admit this, but he's still mentoring me, right? Like, I might have created the company, quote unquote, but he's been my mentor since day one. And I'm very blessed to have a business partner, co-host, co-founder, like somebody like him.
He's like a brother at this point.
He is. Yes.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. You're doing this coaching, self-awareness, healing. Do you ever find that in those discussions, something new pops up for you that you have to process?
It's interesting because I have done, and I don't mean this with any ego, but I've done so much work behind the scenes.
Yeah.
An endless amount, where when Alan and I are in meetings, we do 8, 9, 10 hours of masterminding, and we're talking about the universe and we're talking about the human condition. So when I'm talking to Alan, when I'm talking to my wife and having deep, vulnerable conversations, yeah. But usually when I was working with other people, I was far enough ahead in my own self-awareness where I could lead effectively through my own example. So not usually, depending on who I was in the room with, yes, but not usually when it was with clients. When we would have interviews, that would happen. We interviewed some very next level humans, and I was like, oh my God, I am not ready for this. I am not this type of human yet. So that happened, but it didn't happen often with coaching for me, no.
What would Kevin today tell younger Kevin?
When I was very young, this version of Kevin would say it's not your fault. That it's not your fault that your family isn't quote unquote normal and you don't know who your dad is. Like, that's not your fault. I think a lot of anger I had when I was a kid was based in that. The other thing I would say to that young version of Kevin is, honestly, when you meet your dad in however many years, you're going to realize he's just a man who has his own problems that he never figured out. Like, that was such a freeing thing for me when I met my dad. It didn't go the way I expected, but it probably went the way I needed. And then I think I would have told very early entrepreneur Kev that everything can change. Just because things are the way they are right now does not mean they will be the way they are forever. And they can't be. It doesn't work that way. Things don't ever stay the same. So as long as you're pouring into the positive buckets and you're focused on sustainability, you're focused on improvement, you're focused on consistency, in 5 years, your life can look drastically different, more different than you can even imagine, I would guess. That's probably what I would tell them. Yeah.
Thank goodness the message was there that you can now see that, because sometimes we can go through life so long without having that insight into what we've learned and what we've experienced, right? Yeah. Let's go back to your business. You're a podcaster, but you also do coaching. Tell us what that dynamic looks like.
There was a scary time, I don't know, it's probably like 2 years ago, where I got rid of all of my mindset clients and like peak performance clients. And I said, I'm purely a podcast coach now. That was such a terrifying thing for me. So now that dynamic is vastly different, because I am trying to coach us while we're podcasting on how to improve as podcasters and how to improve as a brand and how to improve our social media. So it's very much, I try to be more critical on us than I would ever be on a client. And the dynamic is, and this is a strange one. Alan understands business at a deeper level, far deeper level than I do. I understand podcasting and naming episodes and coming up with topics and the stories far better than Alan does. So I run, quote unquote, the podcast. I lead the charge on the podcast. Behind the scenes, Alan leads the charge on business. And it's very much when we're in front of the mics and we're doing an episode, I put the hat on. And then when we're behind the scenes doing a training, Alan puts the hat on. So that's the dynamic really is it's not about who's better from a place of ego. It's about who's capable of delivering the value that we want to deliver at the level of the business that we're at, because that's what we're playing for. So it's a very interesting dynamic that has changed over the last 5 years, but I wouldn't be able to do it with somebody who lived in their ego. And Alan wouldn't be able to do it with somebody who lived in their ego either. A lot of it is, look, you're better at this, you lead. I'm better at this, I'll lead. It's important. It's important to have that.
Absolutely. A good balance.
Mhm.
And you've been partners for 5 years now?
Yeah. 5 years, almost 6.
And so in the notes, you mentioned you have over 600,000 plus followers.
Yeah.
How many countries? 126 countries or something like that?
125 plus. I don't know the exact number, but probably 130. Yeah.
Wow. And you're a keynote speaker, correct?
Yes.
So what are some of the topics you talk about, and where can we find you next?
I like talking about what we talk about on the podcast. So we talk, people are probably so sick of hearing us talk about it, but we talk about the importance of consistency, because I don't know. Consistency is a buzzword, but if you can really lock down why consistency is so important to you as a business, as a person, in your relationship, in your fitness, whatever it is, it really is the key to success for most people. We really have been talking a lot lately about self-worth and self-belief and the balance of the two and what that really means to you. We talk a lot about relationships, peak performance, success, all that. I don't know where you'll find me next. You'll definitely find me on a podcast, whether it's this one or whether it's ours. I know we're supposed to be going to Wisconsin in a couple of weeks for a keynote speech to a big school, which I'm excited about. But it's just this, Michelle. It's more podcasting, more impact, more profitability, so we can pour back into the business and our lifestyles. It's that. I'm very blessed, and I want to make sure I don't ever take it for granted. I have a very high level of clarity for what we're doing every day and then what I want to be doing in 10 years. And I didn't always have that. And sometimes I think I forget how blessed I am. So it's this. In 10 years, if you call me, I will be in a studio very similar to this, doing probably the same exact thing to more people, more often, with more money, I would say.
I love the fact that you've gone through this journey of highs and lows and continue to focus on the clarity and consistency. That's really awesome. And I just want to thank you for being a guest today, sharing your story, being vulnerable. As someone who has dealt with suicide thoughts, a lot of times somebody says, it's nice to see you. And for you, it would be, it's nice to be seen, right? Because you've 100%. Decided to be here and not someplace else.
100%. I appreciate you having me. Thank you for having me, letting me share, making me feel safe to share. I appreciate that very much.
Oh, absolutely. Certainly going to keep an eye on you so I can pick up some tips from my own show and my own journey on this podcast.
Well, as you know, I'm happy to add value. So I'll always be a resource for you in whatever form that is.
Great. Thank you so much again. Be well. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with a brand new episode of the Heart Inspired podcast. Until then, I'm your host, Michelle Delgado. And don't forget to lean in, be heard, be inspired. This podcast was created by Heart Metrics Consulting, editing and co-produced by David Castle Productions, and co-distributed by Business Travel 360. For more information about Heart Metrics Consulting, visit us at heartmetrics.com.